Having discussed our mission in the first video, we're now going to continue on into the Gemara. The Gemara picks up on our Mishnah. First, the Gemara discusses chalav. Over here, the Gemara begins to discuss the prohibition against chalav. Then we see over here, the Gemara picks up the discussion about bread, about pasakum, about why bread owned or produced, baked by a non-Jew is, or by an idol worshiper is not kosher. Now here on the bottom, we pick up our discussion of shemen. The Gemara begins with a quote from our Mishnah, V'hashemen shelahen. We noted above that the Mishnah includes a prohibition against consumption of oil. So shemen, with regards to shemen, Rav Amar Daniel Gazar Alav. We're about to be introduced to a disagreement about what the reason for this prohibition is. Rav says that this prohibition is due to a gezerah enacted by Daniel the prophet and his Beit Din. We noted that the Meiri provides a possible rationale for this gezerah, that perhaps this gezerah was created to prevent intermarriage or to prevent kind of mingling or interactions between Jews and non-Jews. If we buy their oil or their bread or their milk, maybe we'll interact with them or assimilate with them too closely. That is Rav's position. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says, I'm going to the next slide here and we'll see if it works. Hopefully the recording won't get cut off. Shmuel says, Lifatan shel kelim tmeim osrotan. Shmuel says that the residue from impure vessels make the oil impure. In other words, he was concerned that the Ovdei Kochavim would be pouring from their impure vessels into the oil. They wouldn't necessarily be pouring impure foods, but there would be residue from the impure vessels. They cook something that otherwise that itself isn't unkosher. They're not pouring treif into the oil, but there's some residue from something that was cooked in this pot, in this vessel, in these kelim. And he says the residue from these kelim tmeim, these impure vessels, make them forbidden. The Gemara now interjects with the following question. Gemara says, Atu, is it because of, or really we could read that in Hebrew as Ha'im, is it because of the fact that, the Gemara is asking really rhetorically, that Kulei Alma Ochle Taharot Ninhu? The Gemara points out that, or questions whether we are all consumers of Taharot, of food that is entirely pure. If, according to Shmuel, the issue is kelim that are impure, that have come into contact with a dead body and so on and so forth, then if that's the case, the Gemara says rhetorically, what, do we only eat foods that are pure? The answer to this, obviously, the answer to this rhetorical question, the Gemara is suggesting, is no. We don't do that. Only in the times of the Beit HaMikdash did people refrain from eating any foods that came into contact with that were impure. The fact is that we eat impure foods. We don't eat non-kosher foods. It's a different level. It's distinct from non-kosher. But we certainly eat impure foods. And if that's the case, why should the residue, why should the zlifatan shel kelim tmeim osrotan, why should residue from impure vessels make our food problematic, prevent us from eating our food? There is no prohibition against us living without a Beit HaMikdash. There is no prohibition against eating impure foods. So Ella, rather, the Gemara clarifies Shmuel's position. It's now zlifatan shel kelim asurin osrotan. The residue from forbidden vessels, not kelim tmeim, not impure vessels, but kelim asurim, forbidden vessels. Now it's not that there's a concern that residue from vessels that have become impure somehow are going to get into the oil. Rather, the concern here is that residue from unkosher vessels. Perhaps we're pouring items from an unkosher vessel, from a vessel that has been used to cook non-kosher food. We're pouring now residue from that vessel into the oil. Shmuel believes that the prohibition against consumption of oil is due to this problem. We'll continue in just a second, but we've so far identified the two positions here. One is Rav stating that the purpose of this prohibition against oil is because of a gezerah from Daniel. Shmuel says the reason behind this prohibition is because kashrut concern for the residue of non-kosher vessels that is being mixed with the oil.